Hello everybody, this is Elena Garrett with Keller Williams Central 75 and I am a realtor in Dallas, Fort Worth area of North Texas. This is another episode of Podcast with Elena, and today we will be discussing buying a house with seller financing. It's also referred online as DUEño A DUEño. And I speak zero Spanish, but I'm sure I nailed the pronunciation. And I apologize, my throat is a little bit sore. I hope it's not COVID, but my throat is a little bit sore. So if you hear me being a little raspy, I apologize. So what is seller financing? Every single day I get questions from people who saw my ad online and they call me and say, I'm interested in seller financing, but what is it? Seller financing is a way to finance a house that also generates a loan. So you're still getting a loan, but that loan is not coming from a bank. And that loan is not being subsidized or in any way controlled by federal government. Therefore, you can get away with lower credit score or low credit score, no credit score, and less documentation that it would normally take to buy a house. But what does it require? So it doesn't require credit, doesn't require documentation. What is the trade-off? The trade-off is that it requires you to be in a little bit higher earning category. So your income should be no less than $3,000 to $4,000, just from my experience with seller financing. And also it requires you to have a large sum, bulk amount of money to put into a down payment. Down payments on seller financing are pretty high. Why would some people consider spending more money than necessary upfront to buy a house with seller financing? Because probably they can't find a way to generate or to obtain a traditional loan through a regular mortgage company, through a litany of problems from defaulted student loans to theft, ID theft that they became, aware of recently. There is a lot of situations where people who earn a lot of money or sufficient money and could have been able to buy a house, for some reason they're delayed year after year and they're tired of renting and they want to move on and finally own a house. So there is hope for those situations, as the universe is usually symmetric. When there is a problem of this size, there is usually a solution of this size. So the solution to these high earners, low credit people or applicants are seller financing, where the credit score is more or less irrelevant. Very often they don't even ask you about your credit score. Be it 400, 500, 800, makes no difference to the seller. What does make a difference to the seller, though, is your debt to income ratio, because if you can only spend $800 of your income on housing after all your other expenses are accounted for, you're not going to be able to qualify for a $500 house. So your debt to income ratio and your income overall, if you're making $10,000 and your monthly deductions from that $8,000 are $500, then you have $7,500 to play with. You can probably get a good sized loan with seller financing. Even though seller financing requires less paperwork than traditional loans, you still need to be able to show that you can somehow pay this loan. So if you're currently unemployed, if you're currently furloughed due to COVID, applying for seller financing is probably not going to happen. You're not going to get anybody guarantee you or issue you a loan if you don't have at least a few months of stable employment that shows consistent income. So who cannot apply for seller financing? People who are currently unemployed. And I received several requests already. They said, I'm interested in seller financing, but I'm currently unemployed. Can I get it? So what's down payment requirements? Remember, down payment requirement is what defines this loan and sets it aside from other types of loans. Upfront, they want you to put down anywhere between 10 to 50%. So think about it, 10 to 50% of $200,000 would be between $20,000 and $100,000. Not a lot of people have $20,000 or $100,000 just laying around in one of their checking accounts. So this, by definition, seller financing only fits a small segment of the total population of renters who would like to own. You need to put down 10% down minimum, possibly 20, 25, 30, plus approximately 5% in prepaids. And I'm not going to go into how I calculate it, but just trust me, you're going to need to prepay your taxes, prepay your insurance, you need to pay for title policy. So overall, to simplify it, look at any house that you want to buy and calculate 15% of the price of that house. And this is how much you'll need to have in cash in order to do seller financing. So kind of judge for yourself how affordable it is going to be for you. Let's look at the financials. So to kind of make it easier to illustrate, let me show you calculations. Let's just say that you're buying let's just say that you have $20,000. If you have $20,000, reverse engineer this, you can only buy approximately $150,000 worth of a house. So if you like those houses in $300,000 category and your cash on hands is $20,000, you're not going to buy a house for $300,000. This is how you're going to calculate and reverse engineer what's affordable for you. Let's just say you have $30,000 in the bank. With $30,000 in the bank, you're getting close to being able to buy a house that costs $200,000. Let's just say you have $35,000 in the bank, and so on and so forth. So kind of look at these numbers and say, based on these numbers, how much of a house can I afford to buy? Because if I don't have this $22,000, then I can't even afford a house that's worth $150,000. And DFW market is pretty hot, so $150,000 doesn't buy you a whole lot. And those houses that you can get for $150,000 are probably not worth getting. So judge for yourself. If you want to just take one thing away from this whole lecture, is how to calculate your cash to close for seller financing. This is a fairly simple exercise. You just look at the cost of the house. Let's just say $200,000 right here. You calculate your down payment, which is minimum 10%, minimum, possibly more, depending on the seller. And then you calculate 5% of the purchase price, which is approximately $9,000, and you will arrive at your cash to close. Just from my own personal experience as a realtor in DFW, if you're looking to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it's not in in the sticks, and you want to be close to good schools, and good school you want to be in Plano, or you want to be in Irving or something like that, I would say prepare to have Irving, forget Plano. If you just want to buy it in Garland, I recommend having $20,000 to $30,000 saved up for your cash to close as a minimum. If you don't have that, you're probably going to be looking at a broken down shack in the middle of a field, sitting with no water, no running water. This is how, and it's going to be missing a roof. So $150K is the minimum that I would budget for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in decent condition. Well, how many of us have $20,000 laying around? Well, some of us do, but not all of us. So what do we have to do if we don't have $20,000 laying around? Well, you have 2 options. So we already determined that the reason you're watching this video is because you probably can't obtain a loan, or we don't know if you can obtain a loan. Have you ever tried? A lot of people try to get seller financing in rent to own. And when I start looking at their finances, they're perfect candidates for FHA loan. They didn't even realize that they were in a good position to move right into the normal FHA loan. But anyhow, let's assume that for reals, we don't have the money, or we don't have the credit to obtain an FHA loan. So what do we do then? We have 2 options. You can either save up for seller financing, So let's just say you don't have $20,000, but you have 15. Okay, how long will it take you to get another $5,000? Get another $5,000, you can potentially get yourself a $150,000 house. So that's one way. You can just kind of take a look and say, okay, within 2 months, I can get 5K and I'm off to the races. If that's not feasible, if you think it will take you another, year or so to get to 20K, let's look at other options. Your other option potentially is the rent to own. I did a video on a rent to own just a few days ago, and I'm going to post that video in the description. Oops, description here. I'm going to post that video in the description, and hopefully, if I can figure out how to do it, I can put one of those nice pop-up links that will appear at the end of the video. I can't promise it. I haven't figured out how to do it, but on a rent to own, let's look at our calculations. Imagine that you have your credit score is 550, and hopefully it's 550. If it's not, it's still feasible. 550 credit score, and you have at least 12 months of a stable employment. Then seller financing, if it's not even close to what you can afford, look at this. Down payment for rent to own is only, so this is the house. Look at this house right here. It's in Haltom City, and it is a true house that was posted on dvhomes.com as a rent to own. So their monthly payment on that house was $1,815, and you had to put up $3,800 to close the deal. You could totally go to DV and get this house on a rent to own, not own, but rent to own, for a total of approximately $5,600, because there is no closing fees to consider. Since you're not closing yet, you're just still renting it. So if you can afford to do this, do this. If you cannot afford to do this, can you afford $5,000? Because most of us can't find a way to make $5,000 or to save $5,000 within the next 6 months to a year. That's another option. If you want to know a little bit more about rent to owns and qualifications for rent to owns, just visit my website, and it has rent to own prominently displayed on the front page, or you can just, I will put this URL down here in my description. Speaking of descriptions, if you're still watching, please like and subscribe, because I will continue to post videos that are relevant to rent to own and seller financing and house hacking and a whole bunch of other topics. Whichever way you can get into the house, I want you to get into the house. So with seller financing, let's just say that we have $25,000 and we can spend that money. What do I get for $25,000? Unlike rent to own, in which in rent to own you have to rent for a couple of years before you actually become the owner of the house. In seller financing, you become the owner of the house on the day that you sign the document. So the title to the house is transferred to you once you shovel over the cash for the down payment and the closing costs. So let's just say a year from now, let's just say that we have this house that we just looked at, right? Person A got into that house on a rent to own, and person B got into that house on seller financing. And let's imagine that both of them, because their grandmother passed away or whatever, something happened, within a year, within 12 months of signing the paperwork, both of them have to leave and go to some place, and they cannot stay in the house anymore. So what would be the outcomes for person A and person B? Person A with seller financing, the house is his. He has the title to the house, so he can either sell the house or rent it out while he is taking care of his grandmother's affairs, and then come back and take possession back of the house. Person B, who is in a rent to own, the moment that he left the house and he cannot be in the house anymore, and he can't pay rent on that house or not planning to pay rent on that house, that's it. That contract with the rent to own, it just went bye-bye. And he spent the money on the rent to own without neither enjoying the rent nor owning. So seller financing is a little bit more solid in that way. It gives you a lot more flexibility on how you can exit out of the house if you don't need it anymore. With both of the rent to own and the seller financing, the point is not to be in those programs forever. The point is to fix your credit problems and actually obtain a regular loan. Because with seller financing, what I have not been discussing is the math behind the seller financing. Seller financing is very expensive, not only because you need to pony up 25K on day one, it also is very expensive from a standpoint of how much interest your loan accumulates. So you're going to be spending more money on interest than somebody who is doing a financing through a traditional mortgage. And interest is still money. If it's leaving your pocket, it's leaving your pocket. It's reducing your purchasing power. So with seller financing, your goal is to get into the house, fix your credit problems, and then refinance and get out of the seller financing. Okay, so question, how do I find, let's just say I have $25,000. My wife wants me to find a house to own, and I don't qualify for a traditional mortgage. How do I go about finding a seller financing houses? Good question. They don't just lay around. You can't go on Zillow and say, find me a seller financing house. Although Zillow might pop up 1 or 2 responses, it's not going to, so Zillow doesn't know about seller financed houses because many of the seller financed houses are only seller financed in the seller's head and not on paper yet. So how do we find them? It's actually pretty tricky. It's not easy. There are two types of owners or 2 types of sellers who are willing to do seller financing. And I'm not going to read through this entire long list. It's going to bore you. What I want you to know is that some sellers already own the unit by the time they decide to seller finance it. For whatever reason, maybe it's their rental, maybe it's their flip, but they already own the unit, and then somehow they decide, instead of just selling it, let me seller finance it. The other type doesn't have a house yet. They said, I will make money through seller financing, but I don't actually have the property yet. So those are 2 types of lenders. So your seller is also your lender with seller financing. So there are 2 types of lenders who you will be able to utilize in your search. It's easier to find type 1. Type 1 are already advertising something like, for example, they might say, for rent or for sale. Okay, that's a pretty good indication that they might be flexible in doing seller financing. Also, sometimes from time to time, very rarely on Zillow, you will find seller financing available or something like that. If you hire me and I'm your real estate agent, I will definitely find you a ton of type A owners, because what I do is I network with investors all day long on Facebook or in person, and I know a lot of people who are open to do seller financing. They have a lot of rental properties, and if I tell them I have a pretty good candidate, we have a conversation. But for type 1, just remember there's a couple of points that you need to take away. Usually the type 1 owner will only have 1 or 2 houses. They might have 10 rentals, but only one of them is available to be seller financed in the next 6 months. So either you take that house or you don't. That landlord has nothing else to offer. Also, very often the landlord wants to seller finance the house, not because he loves the property so much, he thinks it's a wonderful cash flowing property, but exactly the opposite. The property is costing him too much, possibly in maintenance. So he's thinking, how can I get rid of this puppy without losing my shirt during the sale? And he comes up with an idea of doing seller financing. So the house that you're going to very often run into with type 1 owners is an older rehabbed house, but you can rehab the house all day long. It's almost, house is like a car. You can put a new rim on 1975 car, you can put new tires, you can put new I don't know, I'm not a car person, but you can put a lot of money into an old car. You're not going to make it run the same as a new car. So the older rehabbed homes, they might look nice and they might have paint and laminated flooring, but underneath all of that are old pipes and old electrical. Because of that, these older rehabbed homes might be later hard to finance through a traditional loan because of a plethora of issues and out of code problems. So getting into one of these rehabbed homes might be easier than getting out of it because you might not be able to sell it later, at least not very easily. However, what those those type 1 owners give you are flexibility because they're humans. They have a house that's losing money. They're motivated. They're motivated to find a solution. You want to do a seller financing. They have a house they want to get rid of. They're actively searching, how can I solve your problem? So he's going to be more flexible, he or she, going to be more flexible on documentation, on rental history, or on work history. He might be able to give you better loan terms, possibly, although my experience is that it's exactly the opposite. Usually the loan terms are horrible with those type 1 owners because they owe so much money to their contractors. They need a big cash payment to pay it off. But let's not assume anything. I'm just saying that a lot of times I see them asking for 15, 20, and 25, and even 50% down. So they obviously need cash bad. However, what's good about them is they're willing to give you a 30-year note, and their interest, you can negotiate on their interest, but it's still high. Usually I see it between 8 and 12%. What about type 2? So remember what I told you, the information about the sort of financing opportunity for type 2 is only in this investor's mind. It has not materialized yet. Why? Because he doesn't have a deal. So there are some people in the market who are investors and they don't want to own properties. They want to generate passive income without actually owning the property. So seller financing is something that they do from time to time to help them to reach that passive income goal. So how does it work? One investor will go out and buy any house within your budget, just like you're shopping on Zillow. You like that house? Good for you. Let's go buy. So that investor, the type 2, it is one investor with an unlimited number of houses. However many houses are within your budget, that's how many houses he can offer you as a choice. The houses that you can buy with type 2 seller are going to be whatever you want. You want a newer house, go for it. You want a 1920s house because of, beautiful architecture, go for it. He's going to finance you whatever you want. The also good thing about the seller type 2 sort of financing is because you can pick and choose how much problems that house is going to have. You can, help to find a house that's relatively problem-free, that will be easy to either sell or refinance with a traditional loan later. But nothing is without, there is no coin on one side. If there is a good side, there's got to be a bad side to it, right? So the bad side is this type of an investor, number 2 investor, he is not as flexible at all. Why not? Because he has a lot of people asking him to do the exact same thing as you're asking him to do, to sell or finance them. So he is very picky. He needs to make sure that he gets a certain return on investment. Therefore, from those kind of investors, anticipate pretty fixed terms. For example, I know at least a few who will do 10% down on a 5-year note with 9.5 interest and period. With number 1, you can negotiate and you can, figure out what works for both of you. With type 2, take it or leave it, buddy. If you don't like 10% down payment, then go find yourself another investor. So they're going to be more demanding with documentation and work history because they're approaching it as a business. This is a business for them. They're loan officers in their mind, and they take the same attitude. These people are landlords and they're just trying to solve a problem. So if you have, what do we take away from this? Let's just say, for example, that you have a cash business. You're selling, hot dogs on the stand, and none of that cash is being registered anywhere. You take that money into one pocket, that's how much money you got, and out of this pocket, you pay your rent and your utilities and your car. Well, good for you, and except that when it comes to time to buy a house, how are you going to prove that you have enough income? If you have that kind of situation, you never filed a 1099, you haven't filed taxes in 10 years, you know, or your taxes show like $10,000 in profit, but in reality you're making, you know, significantly more, you're probably not going to be able to get financing with type 2 investor because they need more documentation. But you might have a shot with the type 1 owner financing. So whatever is your situation, just look at this table and say which type of seller would fit me more. And how do you start with seller financing? Well, here I am. My name is Elena GARRETT, and I actually specialize in seller financing. So connect with me. My contact information will be below in the video description. And connect with me, first of all. Then let's discuss your needs and limitations and understand, do you have 1099? No? Okay, so that's a limitation. How much cash flow are you showing? You're showing only $1,000 cash flow. That's a limitation. So I'm going to look at everything that's happening in your financials, and then I will probably find an investor, hopefully, that will fit your profile. And it might take me a few tries to find an investor if your case have a lot of, you know, snags in it. What I do is I research very actively on investor networks, and I find investors who are willing to work with me on my cases. And once we find an investor and that investor basically underwrites you or tells you how much he's going to lend to you, I will also help you to find a house. And when we find a house, I'll make sure that house is not a limit. No limit houses for my clients. And also I will make sure that the contract is solid, because guess what? Those investors, they don't always know what they're doing with contracts. So you have to have somebody who looks over your shoulder when you're looking at that contract, make sure that contract is actually not going to cause both of you and the investor a whole bunch of headaches. So contact me. I will guide you from beginning to end and get you into the house as quickly as I can. Well, that's about it for seller financing. There's so much to talk about in seller financing. I would spend the whole evening talking about it. For that reason, I'm still going to talk about it, just not today. So I'm going to produce a couple of other videos. One of them will be seller financing. It is the best option for you. I'm going to put up some spreadsheet and calculate based on the credit score, your history, what is the best option. The best option, rent to own, seller financing, straight up loans. Also, I'm going to look at seller financing process from a legal and step-by-step process of how we go about applying, how we submit the documentation, how long it takes to underwrite, what do we do to get inspections, all of that I'm going to cover in a different podcast called Seller Financing Process from A to Z. Now, for those of you who might be interested in passive income, I know right now you're looking for a house, but that's now. A couple of years from now, you might be already starting to think like an investor. So if you want to generate some passive interest with seller financing, I'm going to do a separate podcast on generating passive income with seller financing. So far, that's been a pleasure, guys. As usual, please contact me for any question that you have, be it seller financing, rent to own, house hacking, any creative idea that you have, how to get yourself from renting to ownership. Please don't forget to click like and click subscribe. My phone number is in this picture. My email is displayed for you. Please don't forget, oops, I have a wrong link in here, so please ignore that link. I'm not going to, that goes to a rent to own page. But this is my true web page, so please go to that web page and you're going to find more info on selling seller financing. So this has been a podcast with Elena. Always a pleasure seeing you guys. Please enjoy your day. Let's get you into a house.